I said earlier, just in case someone is in here who wasn't in here earlier, we view this as an older model. It's too linear in nature, not really how plants operate. After design and build, the original design and build of a plant, usually, that may happen in a few years, and then the plant operates for 50 or 100 years, and there's a lot of upgrades and design changes that occur. This model with the three circles better represents what really happens in a plant, where you've got projects for design and build, a handover, operate and maintain, a project list, the ones that go above the line, become funded, and back into design and build. So this better represents the continuous series of projects that occur in an operating facility. Now, like I said before, I want to emphasize most of the people in this audience I would expect to say something like, Ralph, this is obvious. I don't know why you're showing it to us. You aren't the target audience. The idea is that you would use this model in your discussions with your peers, with senior management who may not be familiar with asset lifecycle management, certainly your IT folks, and it's a way to develop a strategy for your own business around what business processes to optimize, what applications to integrate. And the ExxonMobil presentation this morning, I think is an example of verification of this model, because essentially what he talked about is focusing on the design and build side to optimize those business processes for faster time to benefit. All right. So that was kind of, compared to earlier, that was kind of the quick version of that slide. I want to talk a little bit about information management just for a moment. In the old days, and maybe some of you are still doing this, when you finish a project, basically the EPC has a truck filled with hard copy documents. These pallets get unloaded on the loading dock, and you expect the operate and maintain folks to figure that out. What that has changed to is almost the same thing happening, but in electronic form, where some server somewhere is loaded up with documentation over time, and then the server is transferred, and it's electronic, and that's better. The business process is still faulted somewhat, and it's starting to dawn on me. This may be more obvious to some people in the audience, that there is some pieces of information that are needed by the EPC, and I like to use the example of selecting a valve. So the EPC needs to know things like flow rate, how caustic the material is, and a whole bunch of other parameters, and from that they choose a model number for a valve. Well, after handover, the operate and maintain people don't need a lot of the design information, but they really need to know the model number so they can get to the parts list. The EPC didn't care about the parts list, but the operate and maintain people need to know the part number for the seal inside that valve so that when it fails, they know what to order to replace. So there is some information that's shared, the model number, but each group needs different set of information to be preserved. And I emphasize preserve, for example, in the design and build side, because there's going to be another project. And you don't want the team to have to reinvent all the information that was known at some time in the past for the next project. So the purpose of this slide, again, is to get across a framework or a model that you can use as you start to have discussions with your information management provider, or you have discussions about the business processes to best do handover in your own facility. Now, like I said this morning, earlier today, in the previous session, as a teaser, I was going to talk about this slide again, but in terms of supply chain management. This is a slide, this is Andy's favorite slide. He showed it this morning. The left side is really your plant floor to enterprise, the right side bringing in the Internet of Things and the service provider, machine manufacturer. So I'm going to focus in on the right side and talk about the effect of the Internet of Change Internet of Things on the supply chain. And again, the current situation is, frame it up as chaos, meaning there's a lot of unplanned downtime, a huge amount of inventory just in case something fails. With the technology diversification that's occurring in a lot of businesses as new types of equipment, new equipment designs occur, smarter assets. We could talk about wastewater management. We could talk about power gen, with windmills and solar panels and all the alternate technologies going on. There's huge diversification of technologies, and we see among a lot of our clients ballooning inventories as a result. A lot of this just in case, and whether you're a OEM equipment manufacturer or an end user, you'll have central depots, and then because of the unplanned failure, you can't wait a long time for shipment, there'll be regional depots or local depots. So you got this whole supply chain going on to manage that inventory and make sure it's local to where it potentially could be needed. In the future, with the Internet of Things, the thought process here is now the machine manufacturer can provide to their clients condition monitoring, monitor the condition of the asset, and when there is an issue, can create an alarm and work with the end user for having a planned refurb of that piece of equipment. So now you go to planned downtime. Well, as a result of it being planned, now you have time to move the inventory. So this potentially completely rechanges your supply chain management approach, because instead of having so many regional depots, you can now have more centralized depots where the inventory is shared among a much larger customer base, and you can better optimize that inventory. So, earlier today I talked about the rapid adoption, or my prediction that it would be adopted by machine manufacturers, the Internet of Things for condition monitoring, for a bunch of good business reasons. I want to layer on top of that also the improved supply chain management. Now, from an executive viewpoint, the old method is just downright ugly, because you got a huge amount of inventory, low inventory turns, that lowers the ROA, return on assets. From a CFO's perspective, that is just ugly. It lowers shareholder value, makes the metrics that the financial community measures a firm from based on the balance sheet not so good. It depresses those metrics, and as a result, Wall Street won't pay so much for the stock. The future, if you can now convert that inventory to cash, which is, as you work down, you better optimize the inventory, work down the inventory, it converts to cash. That vastly improves the ROI, because now instead of cash being tied up in inventory, it moves to other areas on the balance sheet, and the financial metrics improve. And that is almost literally CFO nirvana. They just love converting fixed assets into cash that improves the metrics in the balance sheet. So again, I emphasize that we're predicting there's a huge business value for the Internet of Things coupled with condition monitoring, and the best people to do that is the equipment OEMs. So in terms of, I want to convert this now into recommendations. If you are an equipment OEM, you need to adopt the Internet of Things as quick as you can. If my $100 Blu-ray player can afford to have an internet connection and upgrade its own software for me, that's I got to believe the Wi-Fi capability for that Blu-ray player and that connection is like $5. So if you're selling a $1,000 or higher piece of equipment, it makes sense, to add the Internet of Things, and then you can get additional revenue from a services opportunity. So equipment OEMs adopt the Internet of Things and condition monitoring. If you are an end user, I highly recommend that you make the Internet of Things part of your selection criteria for equipment. because then you can start outsourcing essentially some of your maintenance to the equipment manufacturer. And thirdly, if you're an EAM supplier, then I would, all the EAM suppliers, at least the major ones, have a way to manage services, and we're talking about another services. But the suggestion is that you just review the software, maybe for things like ease of use, so that it can scale up to much higher adoption of services for equipment. Right now, the average is about 20% of a maintenance budget may be spent on services of one way or another. If this takes hold, that could rise to a lot higher number, and you just want to review the software to make sure that that isn't going to be a painful transition for your clients.